When my husband forgot my birthday last year, I didn't cry. I just smiled, cut the small cake I had bought for myself, and told him, "It's okay, you've been busy." That night, when he fell asleep watching TV, I sat on the edge of the couch and whispered to myself, "It's okay, you've been busy too, just for everyone else." I guess that was the first time I truly realized it, that somewhere along the way, I had become invisible in my own home. Not because I wasn't loved, but because I never demanded to be noticed. I believe that if you give love freely, it will always find its way back to you. But life, I've learned, doesn't always work that way. My name is Emily. I'm 49 years old, a mother of 2 grown kids, and for most of my life I've been the kind of woman who says yes more often than she should. Yes, I can handle it. Yes, it's fine. Yes, don't worry about me. It's strange, isn't it? How easily kindness can turn into a quiet prison. You think you're building peace, but sometimes all you're building is silence, the kind that no one even notices anymore. Every day used to start the same. I'd wake up before the sun, make coffee for my husband, pack his lunch, and then start working from home. I work as a freelance editor, mostly from my little desk near the kitchen window. I loved that spot. I could see the trees outside, and sometimes when the light came in just right, the room felt like a warm hug. But lately, even that sunlight started to feel distant. It's funny, you can live in the same house for 20 years, and one day it starts feeling like someone else's place, like you're just visiting. My husband, Mark, isn't a bad man. He's hardworking, practical, and quiet. But somewhere in the quiet, our connection faded. He used to hold my hand at night. Now his phone holds his attention more than I do. Our kids, Lena and Ryan, had both moved out by then. Lena got married and lived 3 states away, and Ryan was busy building his own life in California. I was proud of them, truly. But once the house got empty, I started hearing things I'd never noticed before. The sound of my own footsteps, the hum of the refrigerator, the silence of no one needing me. I used to think being needed was the same as being loved. But once that need disappeared, I realized how little of me was left. Soft pause, faint ticking clock sound. One evening, I remember sitting at the dining table waiting for Mark to come home. Dinner was ready. The candles were lit, not for romance, but because I liked how they made the house feel less cold. It was our anniversary, 25 years, and I had spent all afternoon making his favorite dish, baked chicken with rosemary. The smell filled the house, warm and hopeful. But by 8 p.m., I knew he wasn't coming. There was no call, no text, just the message that said, "Working late, don't wait up." I looked at the candles, at the food getting cold, and something in me, something quiet, cracked. Not loud enough to break me, but just enough to make me realize how long I'd been waiting for someone who wasn't even looking back. I blew out the candles, covered the food, and sat down with a glass of wine. That night, I talked to myself like an old friend. "Maybe it's not him," I said softly. "Maybe it's you, Emily. Maybe you've made it too easy to forget you." And that thought stayed with me, because it wasn't anger I felt, it was emptiness. Like I'd given every bit of my kindness, my patience, my softness, and there was nothing left for me. Slow background music fades, transition to reflective tone. People always said I was the strong one, the calm one, the one who holds everything together when things fall apart. But what they didn't see was how often I'd cry quietly in the shower so no one would hear. How often I'd rehearse words I never got the courage to say. Can you just listen to me for once? Can you just look at me like you used to? But every time I wanted to speak up, something in me whispered, "Don't ruin the peace." And so I didn't. That's the thing about being the peacemaker. You spend so much time avoiding storms that you forget sometimes you're the one standing in the rain. Soft ambient, gentle rain outside window. I grew up in a small town in Illinois. My parents raised me to be kind, humble, and forgiving. My mom used to say, "Emily, never let the world change your heart. Even if it's cruel, stay gentle." And I believed her. I still do. But I also wish someone had told me that being gentle doesn't mean letting people walk all over your soul. When I met Mark, I was 23. He was quiet, a bit awkward, but sweet. He had that kind of smile that made you believe he'd never hurt you. We met at a bookstore, of all places. He dropped his coffee on a stack of novels, and I helped him clean it up. We laughed. He asked me to dinner that night. It was simple, genuine, like something out of an old movie. We built a life from scratch, a small house, a modest income, and 2 beautiful kids. There were struggles, of course, bills, illnesses, disagreements, but we always made it through. At least that's what I told myself. Gentle piano music returns, tone softens. Sometimes I wonder if we ever stopped to actually see each other during all those years. I was so busy taking care of everyone, the kids, the house, his needs, my work, that I forgot to take care of me. And when you stop taking care of yourself, people start assuming you don't need care at all. There's a saying that stuck with me lately. Kindness without boundaries invites disrespect. I didn't have boundaries. I thought love didn't need them, but love does. It needs space, respect, and balance. And I had lost all 3. It wasn't one big fight that broke me. It was 1,000 little moments, a forgotten thank you, a careless tone, a week without a single question like, "How are you doing?" Tiny cracks, spreading quietly until one day I looked at the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired, not just from work, but from being strong all the time. I remember calling Lena one evening. She was busy, of course, new job, new husband, new life, but I needed to hear her voice. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked. And for a second, I almost said no, but instead I said, "Of course, sweetheart, I'm fine." And the truth is, I wasn't. I was just used to pretending. That's how it started. The slow realization that my kindness wasn't being appreciated anymore, that somewhere, somehow, my giving nature had turned into something people expected, not cherished. And I didn't blame them. I blamed myself for making it so easy. But what I didn't know then was that this quiet ache was about to change my life. Because sometimes it takes being completely unseen to finally see yourself. The next few months after that anniversary felt like walking through fog. Everything looked the same kitchen, same porch, same morning coffee. But nothing felt the same. Mark and I talked less, not because we were angry, but because silence had become easier than conversation. When I'd ask about his day, his answers were short. Busy, fine, same old. Sometimes he'd look up from his phone, smile faintly, and say, "Sorry, Em, I'm just tired. We'll talk later." But later never came. I began filling the silence with chores, folding laundry that didn't need folding, cleaning spotless counters, watering plants twice a day. It's strange how, when your heart feels empty, you start fixing everything around you, as if cleaning the house can somehow clean your sadness too. Soft sound of dishes being placed on the table. One evening, as I set dinner on the table, I realized how automatic it had all become. I was serving plates, passing napkins, smiling at nothing. Mark was eating quietly, his eyes half on the TV, half on his phone. I looked at him and said gently, "Do you remember when we used to eat dinner on the porch? You loved that." He didn't even look up. I remember. I waited for him to say more, but he didn't, and something about that short answer hit harder than any argument could have. I wanted to ask, "Do you still love me?" But I didn't, because deep down, I was scared of what silence might follow. The days blended into each other. I started volunteering at the local library, mostly to have someone to talk to. There, I met people, older women, widows, divorcees, who smiled with that same quiet sadness I had. They talked about their grandkids, their gardens, their memories. And in their voices I heard echoes of myself. One of them, Mrs. Turner, once told me, "Sweetheart, women like us, we give and give until our hands are empty. And when we finally stop giving, the world calls us selfish." I laughed softly, but her words stayed with me because they were true. At home, I started noticing small things. Mark spending more time at work. Late-night texts with colleagues that he never mentioned. The way he'd step outside to take calls. I didn't assume the worst. That's not who I am. But I knew something had shifted. There's a different kind of silence that enters a marriage when someone's heart starts drifting away. It's not loud, it's not cruel, it's just absent. One night I asked him, "Are you happy?" He paused, looked at me for a second, then looked away. "I guess I am." "Why?" I wanted to say, "Because I'm not." But I smiled instead, just asking, and he nodded like it was nothing. Pause, faint ticking clock sound. After he went to bed, I sat by the window for a long time. The streetlights outside flickered softly, and the world felt so still. I thought about all the little moments we used to share, morning coffee talks, late-night laughs, holding hands on road trips. Where did they go? Or were they always destined to fade? Sometimes I'd open our old photo albums just to remind myself that we were real. That once, we looked at each other like we were each other's whole world. But even looking at those pictures, I noticed something I hadn't before. In every photo, I was smiling at him, and he was smiling at the camera. Soft, emotional piano notes, warm but melancholic. A few weeks later, Lena came to visit, and too. She hugged me so tightly when she arrived, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea, just like we used to when she was younger. She looked around and said, "Mom, everything looks the same here, even that old curtain." I smiled. "Yeah, I guess I like things that stay." She looked at me with that knowing daughter look. "Mom, are you okay?" And again, that same old answer rolled off my tongue. "I'm fine." But she didn't believe me. She reached across the table, held my hand, and said softly, "You've always been the strong one, Mom, but strong people need someone too." Her words almost broke me, because I had spent so many years being strong for everyone else that I had forgotten what it felt like to be held, to be comforted, to be seen. After she left, I went to my bedroom and cried quietly, not out of sadness, but relief. For once, someone had noticed. Someone saw through the mask. A few days later, Mark and I went grocery shopping together. It was something we hadn't done in months. I thought maybe this would be a small way to reconnect. But the moment we stepped into the store, he drifted off to another aisle, looking at his phone again. I stood there, staring at a shelf of soup cans, thinking, how did we end up here? Two strangers pushing the same cart. Later that night, as we unloaded the groceries, he said, "You didn't get the kind of cereal I like." And I just smiled. I must have forgotten. He sighed. "You forget a lot these days." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. That small tone of irritation. The same tone that used to be reserved for strangers, now aimed at me. I looked at him for a long moment and said quietly, "Yeah, maybe I do." Then I walked away before he could see the tears welling up. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the years I had poured myself into this family. Every meal cooked, every birthday planned, every quiet sacrifice made just to keep things smooth. And yet, somehow, I felt like a guest in my own life, a background character in a story I helped build. It's a hard thing to admit when you start realizing your own role in your unhappiness, but it's also the first step toward something new. The next morning, I decided to take a walk. Just me, my coffee, and the soft chill of the early air. I walked down our street, past the same mailboxes, the same gardens, the same houses. But for once, I wasn't rushing anywhere. I stopped by the park where Mark and I used to take the kids. The swings creaked gently in the wind. I sat on the bench and closed my eyes. And in that silence, I whispered to myself, "Emily, you've done enough for everyone else. When will you do something for you?" Music builds slightly, reflective piano and cello. That was the first time I allowed myself to even think about me. Not as a wife, not as a mother, just as a woman. A person who deserved joy, attention, and care. I went home that day feeling lighter, though nothing had really changed. Mark was still distant, the house still quiet. But something in me had shifted, just a little, like the first crack of sunlight after a long storm. That evening, when Mark came home late again, I didn't wait at the table. I ate dinner alone, washed my plate, and went upstairs. He came into the room, surprised. "You already ate?" "Yeah," I said softly. "I was hungry." He looked at me for a second, then shrugged. It was a small moment, tiny, really, but it felt powerful. Because for once I didn't wait. And that, I think, was the beginning of change. I didn't know it then, but these quiet decisions, eating alone, walking alone, choosing myself, were going to lead me toward something bigger, toward a truth I had ignored for too long. That sometimes, when you stop waiting for people to see your worth, you start finally seeing it yourself. It was early autumn when everything came to light. The days were shorter, the air crisper, and the house somehow felt colder than usual. Maybe it wasn't the weather. Maybe it was just the space between us growing wider by the day. I'd noticed Mark acting differently for weeks. Quieter, distracted, almost restless. He would come home late, sometimes smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He'd say it was from someone at work who hugged him goodbye, or from the office. Someone must have sprayed too much, and I wanted to believe him. Because believing was easier than breaking. But deep down, I already knew. One Friday evening while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the dresser. I didn't want to look. I've never been that kind of person, but something inside me whispered, "You deserve the truth." The message preview showed a heart emoji, then a name I didn't recognize, Tessa. My hands shook a little as I opened it. The conversation was short, but it said everything, little messages. "I miss you already. You looked so tired today. Wish you could stay longer." My heart didn't race. It didn't explode in anger. It just sank, like a stone in deep water. I closed the phone, set it back exactly where it was, and sat on the edge of the bed. The shower kept running in the background, the sound of water, the sound of truth washing over me. When he came out, he smiled faintly and said, "You okay?" And for the first time in 25 years, I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "No, Mark, I'm not." He froze, towel in hand. "What do you mean?" I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just asked softly, "Who's Tessa?" He stared at me, shocked, maybe guilty, maybe both. Then he sat down slowly on the chair near the window. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. He just said, "It's not what you think." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because that's what people always say when it's exactly what you think. He started explaining about late nights, stress, someone who listened when he felt unheard, someone who understood. He said it wasn't serious, that it just happened. and I listened, calm, quiet, steady, because my world had already fallen apart in silence long before this moment. When he finished, I just said, "Do you love her?" He hesitated, then said softly, "No, I don't think so." That hurt more than a yes ever could, because "I don't think so" meant he didn't even know. After 25 years together, I wasn't even sure if I was the woman he still loved, or just the one he lived with. I stood up and said, "Mark, I'm not angry, I'm just tired. Tired of being the one who gives everything and gets so little back." He looked at me, finally seeing me for the first time in years, but it was too late. That look, that sudden recognition, came after the damage was done. He said, "Em, please, let's talk about this." And I nodded. "We can, but not tonight." That night, I slept in the guest room. For the first time in my marriage, I chose space, not to punish him, but to finally breathe. Lying there in that smaller bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt something strange. Peace, not happiness, not relief, just peace. Because the truth, as painful as it was, finally set me free from wondering. The next morning, I made coffee for myself, not for both of us. I sat by my kitchen window, the same spot where I used to dream, and watched the sunlight hit the trees. The air smelled of cinnamon and old memories. I thought about everything. The years of quiet sacrifices, the laughter that faded, the gentle touches that disappeared. And somewhere between the sips of coffee and the stillness of that morning, I realized something important. I had spent my whole life being afraid of losing people, but somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. That day I went for a long drive. No destination, no plan, just me, the road, and the sound of my own thoughts. I passed by old fields, small diners, and familiar gas stations, places that reminded me of simpler times, when love felt easy and laughter came naturally. I ended up at a little lake we used to visit when the kids were small. It was quiet there, just the rustle of leaves and the water lapping against the shore. I sat on the old wooden bench and took a deep breath, the kind of breath that feels like it comes from your soul. For a long time I didn't move. I just stared at the ripples in the water and whispered to myself, "You've done your best, Emily. You really did." Tears finally came then, soft, slow, cleansing. Not from anger, but from release. I wasn't crying because he betrayed me. I was crying because I had betrayed myself by settling for so little love for so long. That evening, when I came home, Mark was sitting at the table. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. He said quietly, "I'm sorry, I really am. I never meant to hurt you." And I believed him, because that's who I am. I believe people, even when I shouldn't. But this time I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't say, "It's okay." I just nodded and said, "I know." He asked, "Do you want me to leave?" And I said softly, "I don't know yet. I just need time. I need to find me again." He didn't argue. He just nodded and left for the night, staying at his brother's place. That night the house felt empty, but not lonely. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone. No footsteps to listen for, no phone buzzing to wonder about, just me, the quiet, and a sense of strange calm. I lit a candle, sat on the couch, and realized this was what peace actually felt like. Not constant happiness, not perfection, just the absence of chaos. Over the next few days, I wrote in a journal every night. I wrote letters to myself, letters of forgiveness, letters of truth, letters that began with, "Dear Emily, I'm proud of you." Writing became my way of healing. I wrote about how I wanted to rediscover joy, small joys, like painting again, walking barefoot in the grass, baking cookies just because. And with each word, I felt lighter, like I was slowly piecing myself back together. A week later, Mark came home. he asked if we could talk. We sat in the living room, the same place where years of silence had grown between us. He said he ended things with her, that it was a mistake, that he wanted to work on us. And for a long time, I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had built a life with, and the man who had broken my heart. Then I said quietly, "Mark, I forgive you." He looked shocked, maybe even relieved. But before he could speak, I added, "But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to how they were. It means I'm choosing peace, whether you're part of it or not." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. And for the first time in years, we truly sat together in silence, not out of distance, but out of understanding. That night, I realized something profound. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. It's choosing not to carry the weight of someone else's mistakes any longer. And for me, that was the beginning of healing. Sometimes you have to break your own heart to set your soul free, and that's exactly what I was learning to do. After Mark left, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that almost hums, not peaceful, but heavy, like it's waiting for you to fill it again. For the first few weeks, I didn't do much. I just existed. It's been a little over a year now. Sometimes I still wake up and expect to hear the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen, the faint clatter of plates or the low hum of conversation. But then I remember, this silence is mine now. And instead of feeling lonely, I feel grateful. The first few months after Mark left were about surviving. The next few were about learning to breathe again. But somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I started to live. I've learned something about time. It doesn't heal all wounds, not completely, but it softens the edges. It turns pain into memory and memory into meaning. When I think about my marriage now, I don't feel anger anymore. There were good moments, plenty of them. There were Sundays when we'd drive out to the farmer's market, arguing about who made better coffee. There were evenings when we'd sit on the porch and talk about growing old together. Those memories still belong to me. They're part of who I was. I'd make a cup of coffee and sit by the kitchen window, watching the light move across the floor. Morning light used to mean rushing, packing lunches, folding laundry, calling out for someone to hurry up. Now it meant nothing, but maybe that's where healing begins, in the stillness after the storm. The first time I heard my own voice out loud in that silence, it startled me. I was talking to the cat and something small like, "Come here, baby." And for the first time, I realized how long I'd gone without hearing my own softness. I started with little things. Fixing the old porch light that Mark said he'd get to eventually. Planting fresh herbs in the kitchen window, mint, basil, rosemary. But they don't define who I am now. I once read that forgiveness doesn't mean saying, "What you did is okay." It means saying, "I'm not going to let what you did define me anymore." That stuck with me. So I started forgiving little by little. The moments he dismissed my feelings, the times he made jokes at my expense in front of friends, even the silence, the kind that used to cut deeper than words. I forgave it all, not for him, but for me, because carrying resentment was like carrying stones in my pocket, and I was tired of sinking. One Sunday morning, I drove to the old church in town. I hadn't been there in years. It wasn't about religion that day. It was about closure. The sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, scattering colors across the pews. I sat in the back, closed my eyes, and whispered quietly, "Thank you for teaching me what love is and what love isn't." I felt a strange calm then, not the kind that comes from forgetting, but from finally accepting. Lily visits often now. She says the house feels lighter. Maybe it's because I replaced the heavy curtains with white ones that let the morning light in. Or maybe it's because my heart finally stopped trying to prove its worth. She sometimes stays for dinner, and we cook together, laughing about old times, burning garlic bread like we used to. And when she leaves, she hugs me a little longer. "Mom," she told me once, "I used to think kindness made people weak. But watching you, I think it's your superpower." That made me tear up a little, not out of sadness, but pride, because maybe that's the legacy I'll leave. That kindness can survive anything. I still work at the bookstore. It's my favorite part of the day. Every time I see a customer lost in the pages of a book, I think, this is what connection looks like. Quiet, but real. There's a man who comes in often around my age. He's polite, gentle, always looking for poetry books. We talk sometimes about weather, books, how coffee tastes better on cold mornings. There's no rush, no expectation. Just two people who've both lived and lost, finding comfort in small conversations. And maybe that's enough. Love doesn't always have to be grand or loud. Sometimes it's just a smile at the end of a long day. On my 51st birthday, I took myself out to dinner for the first time. A small Italian restaurant near the edge of town. I ordered my favorite dish, chicken piccata, and a glass of white wine. The waiter asked if anyone would be joining me, and I smiled and said, "Just me." He nodded politely, but I could tell he didn't understand the beauty of that answer. As I sat there, savoring each bite, I thought about how far I'd come. A year ago, I wouldn't have been able to eat alone without feeling empty. Now it felt like freedom, because solitude and loneliness aren't the same. Loneliness is longing for someone who isn't there. Solitude is finding peace in your own company. And that night, I was peaceful. When I came home, the sky was filled with stars, the kind you only notice when you stop rushing. I stood on the porch, wrapped in my shawl, and whispered into the night, "Thank you. For everything, for the love that once was, for the pain that made me stronger, for the lessons that shaped me. Because even though my kindness was taken for weakness, it wasn't. It was the thing that saved me. It was the reason I could still open my heart, still see beauty in small moments, still believe in good things. I've come to understand that we can't control how people treat us, but we can control how we respond, whether we let their choices make us bitter or wiser. And I choose wisdom, I choose peace, I choose love, the quiet kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. There's a quote I keep on my fridge now. It says, "Be kind, not because they deserve it, but because you do." Every time I read it, I smile. Because I've lived those words. Sometimes people still ask, "Do you miss him?" And I tell them, I miss who I thought he was, but I love who I've become. That usually surprises them, how soft my voice sounds when I say it. But that's the truth. I'm not angry, I'm not broken, I'm just me, and that's enough. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been through something similar. Maybe you gave too much, loved too deeply, forgave too easily. And maybe like me, you wondered if that made you weak. Let me tell you this, it doesn't. Kindness is not weakness. It's courage in disguise. It's grace when the world gives you every reason to turn cold. It's choosing light, even when the darkness feels easier. So don't stop being kind. Don't stop loving softly. The world needs people like you. Steady hearts, gentle hands, open souls. Because one day, that kindness will come back to you. Not always from the same people, not in the same way, but it will. It might return as peace in your heart, or laughter in your kitchen, or sunlight on your face after a long, dark season. And when it does, you'll understand what I finally did, that being kind was never the mistake. Giving it to the wrong people was. Tonight, as I close my journal, I look around this quiet little home. The walls I painted myself, the shelves I built, the plants growing in the windowsill. Everything here carries a story of endings and beginnings, of loss and rediscovery. And as the candle flickers beside me, I smile, because even after everything, I'm still here, still kind, still standing, still me. I don't know why, but watching something grow in my care again, it gave me a reason to get up in the morning. Sometimes I'd walk down to the lake near our neighborhood. There's a bench that overlooks the water, the kind of place where the air feels cleaner somehow. I'd sit there with my journal, the one Mark gave me on our 10th anniversary. He'd written on the first page, "For all the beautiful things you'll write someday." That made me smile. It also made me ache. At first, my writing was messy. Lists of things I missed, things I wanted to forget, things I wished I'd said. Then slowly, the pages began to change. I started writing about gratitude for small things, the sound of rain at night, the neighbor's kid waving as he rode his bike, the way my coffee cup felt warm in my hands each morning. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was peace in small doses. One afternoon, my daughter Lily called. She had been distant ever since Mark left, confused, maybe embarrassed by everything that happened, but that day, her voice was softer. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking about you a lot. Are you okay?" For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to tell her everything, how lonely I was, how strange it felt to be free and lost at the same time. But instead, I took a deep breath and said, "I'm getting there, honey, one day at a time." She paused, then said quietly, "I'm sorry for not calling sooner." That broke something open inside me, not pain this time, but release. We talked for over an hour about her job, her boyfriend, the new apartment she was decorating. She asked if I'd visit soon. After we hung up, I cried, not from sadness, but because love, when it returns, feels like sunlight after weeks of rain. A few weeks later, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. He looked older, not in years, but in spirit. We both froze for a moment, unsure what to say. Then he smiled a little and said, "Hey, Emily." It was strange how ordinary it felt, like meeting an old classmate, not the man I'd shared a lifetime with. We talked briefly. He said work was going fine, the kids were good. He asked how I was doing, and for the first time in years I answered honestly, not to please, not to prove anything. "I'm okay," I said. "Really?" He nodded, as if he believed me. Then he hesitated and said, "You always were the kindest person I knew." That sentence lingered long after he walked away. For years I had thought my kindness made me weak, that being patient, forgiving, and gentle meant letting people hurt me. But in that moment, standing in the grocery aisle between canned soups and coffee beans, I realized something. My kindness wasn't the weakness. It was my strength. It was what kept me human when everything else fell apart. That night, I went home and lit a candle. Not for romance or nostalgia, but for peace. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had seen years of laughter and arguments and silence, and I whispered a small prayer, not for Mark, not for what could have been, but for myself. For the woman who stayed kind, I said softly, even when the world told her not to. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. The house still felt quiet, but it no longer felt empty, because now that silence belonged to me. Over the months, I began rebuilding in ways I never expected. I took a part-time job at a local bookstore. The owner, a gentleman named Paul, loved to talk about old novels and the smell of new paper. Being surrounded by stories made me feel alive again. Every book on the shelf was a reminder that everyone carries pain, but also resilience. Sometimes customers would linger, looking lost in thought, and I'd smile and say, "Take your time. The right story finds you when you're ready." I think that line was for me too. At home, I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My first piece was simple, a small lake under soft evening light. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I hung it on the living room wall, right where Mark's framed quote used to be. The empty space finally felt filled again, not with memories of him, but with pieces of me. As months turned into a year, I noticed how much lighter my heart felt. Forgiveness isn't sudden. It's like the slow melting of ice. You don't realize it's happening until one day you wake up and the world looks softer. I forgave Mark, not because he deserved it, but because I did. Holding on to bitterness felt too heavy. I wanted to walk freely into the rest of my life. One Sunday morning, I drove out to that same lake bench. The air was cool, the water still. I closed my eyes and thought about the woman I used to be, the one who gave too much, loved too quietly, and never asked for herself. I smiled and whispered, "You did your best." Then I took a deep breath and let the wind carry everything else away. That evening, as I stood by the window, I noticed how golden the light was, how it touched the curtains, the old photo frames, the gentle outlines of my plants. For the first time in a long while, I felt home. Not in the sense of four walls and a roof, but home inside myself. My kindness was taken for weakness, I whisper one last time. But in the end, it became my strength. And with that, I closed the light, let the night take me, and finally, peacefully, rest.